Well, I think it is among one of the greatest wines that I've ever made, and clearly the greatest wine I've ever made from Argentina and in South America. It is right up there with one of the favorites. It was a great vintage. It's a 2011 vintage, and so that helps. And of course, we're working with a very old vineyard, over 80-year-old vineyard that's at high elevation, nearly 1,000 meters above sea level on the shoulder of the Andes. So it's also I think the other great thing about this property is that it's still on its own route. So it's a very unique vineyard in the world. Not many exist today on their own route. So we've been working with the vineyard for over 10 years, but it's a much older vineyard, and we're very privileged. I think, from my perspective, what makes this wine particularly great is, first of all, its texture. It's a very, very smooth and fine-grained tannin, and so it has, in addition to the texture, is its structure. It's very full in the mouth, so a good body, good weight, and very good length as well. Obviously, to do all of that, but I think finally it's a question of balance. And so this wine, I think, brings all those things together in a great harmony. I think great wines are made in both places, both vineyards and winery. However, the vineyard is where the majority of the work is done. And of course, we do the very best each year with what we're given in terms of weather. Every year you have to adapt, and that's one of the exciting things about this kind of work, is that no 2 years in my entire career have ever been the same. We can hark back and say, well, I remember back in 1983, for example, that there was a parallel to 2011. Nevertheless, once you think you know exactly how then Mother Nature throws you the proverbial curveball, and you have to adapt to that. Well, certainly the vintage plays into, because the vintage is about the climate, and the climate that year was, let's say, nearly benign. It was really not too hot at any moment, or too cold, and we had very good conditions throughout the season. We were never forced to make a picking decision, so we had the time to allow the grapes to ripen to full maturity. And one of the things very important to me is that we get the full physiological maturity of the berry. I don't check the sugar. I don't measure by what we call brix or uxla or whatever. I only go by the taste, the appearance of the vine, and what I perceive to be the physiological maturity of the berry. A great wine first requires the ability to, well, first it has to be balanced, very well integrated, and should show elegance, and I think at the same time power. There should be a structure to the wine, depth to the wine, complexity, which will evolve, of course, over time. And I think that's what makes a great wine. Finally, ageability. Well, I'm going to go with one of the very first wines that I ever tasted, and that was a 1962 Chateau Yquem. So I'm going to put that at the top because it was that epiphany from drinking that wine that took me into a career of wine.